Unchecked. Now there's something that we need to be aware of if we are using integer and unsigned integer values. And the thing that we need to know is that in previous versions of Solidity prior to 0.8, you got something called overflows and underflows. It's a term used whenever a variable is at maximum or minimum capacity and literally loops over to its minimum or maximum value again. Now in newer versions of Solidity 0.8 and upwards, the underflow and overflow problems when it comes to integer and unsigned integers is not a problem anymore, because Solidity caters for these checks in later versions. Let's take a look at an example by looking at our pizza order code. Here we have a function that places an order and every time increments this order count. Now let's say this order count was an unsigned integer 8, so a uint 8. This means that the possible values would be from 0 to 255. I'm going to make this public so we can read the value and then assign the initial value to 254. So every time that we place an order, this order count will increment. Now what happens if it extends its maximum value that the uint 8 can hold? Well, let's check it out. Deploy the contract, and now let's go and place an order. We'll place an order, and then we'll go ahead and check the order count. It's now sitting at 255. Let's do it again and see what happens. Let's place the order. Oh, and we see we have an error. And because we try to increment a value on a variable that is at maximum capacity. So the transaction failed, and we can see that our order count is still at 255. So it doesn't matter how many times we place an order right now, our count is not going to increment and the function is simply going to fail. Now in this case, Solidity prevents us from going over and overflowing this variable. Now we can bypass this by simply going to the place where we are trying to increment and wrapping this code in an unchecked block. So we're going to increment inside of this unchecked block. Now, if we save the code and redeploy, and we go and check our order count, it's 254, place an order, 255, and if we place an order again, it was successful. But what is the order count now? It is 0. And if we do it again, now it's 1. So it starts counting again, and it will count all the way up to 255 and go to 0 again. This is the overflow taking place. And by using the unchecked block, basically we are telling Solidity to not check this code, and we know that this is going to overflow. Now in our example, this is not good, because if we are going to start right from 0 again, we are going to overwrite some of our orders. So we don't want that to happen. But even though it's not very useful in our example, sometimes you might need to use unchecked for certain situations. And I just want to mention as well, if this were to decrement and our value started at, let's say 1, and we went ahead and deployed the contract, if we now create an order, we should see that our order is going the other way around. So now you know if you need to use overflow and underflows in your code, you can achieve it by implementing the unchecked block. Now I'm going to remove this from our example and also change this back to a 256. And let's not forget to increment again.